This was back in 2013 when I was based in Holland, British Marine for context. I had been married to my wife for a little over 18 months when I deployed to Afghanistan. My wife had a job in the British delegation on base and got to know pretty much every Brit and their husband-wife. One day, we were directly targeted by a vehicle, born IED. Now, whilst it wasn't uncommon for there to be a threat to coalition forces in general, being directly targeted felt more personal for obvious reasons. That was also the day I found out about an RAF guy back in Holland had tried it on with my wife. I found him on Facebook and, still feeling rather raw about Terry trying to blow me up, messaged him words to the effect of, "If you go near Mrs. X again, I will put glass in your throat the next time I see you." The next day, one of my bosses, who was also RAF, messaged me on Facebook to say that this guy had been over to his office and basically tattled on me. He gave me a friendly warning heads up that this guy could have gone to the MPs and reported me. I have no idea what would have happened, but I acknowledged the warning and said it won't happen again. My boss had my back and actually told him to wind his neck. Fast forward to when I got back from Afghanistan. A few days had passed and I was starting to settle into a normal life again. My wife brought it up after explaining she didn't mention it at the time due to my reaction the first time, that an Army Sergeant Major had tried to message her via Facebook. He told her she was beautiful and wanted her number. She promptly blocked him. I was pissed off to say the least, but I understand why she kept it until I was back on home soil. The next day, I went into our department and spoke to my other boss, an Army captain. I told him what had happened and he said, "Leave it with me." He basically had a chat with him and nothing came of it. I felt deflated and even more pissed off. That was until our senior military officer came into our department. He welcomed me back and asked how my tour was. "Still pissed off," I said. "It was good, sir, with the exception of Sergeant Major Douchebag trying to get round my wife. He was, understandably, a little taken aback." About an hour or so later, he emailed me saying that he feels the need to do something official about this. Something I had forgotten was that the colonel and sergeant major belonged to the same regiment, so having one of his own behave like this had clearly gripped him. I told him the full story and provided screenshots of what Sergeant Major Douchebag had said to Mrs. X. For this to go official, my wife had to provide a statement. Unfortunately, Mrs. X is very non-confrontational and said she didn't want this to continue. I respected her wishes of not wanting to provide a statement, but hatched a plan that would be 3 years in the making. The timing is important. I emailed the colonel and said that Mrs. X has declined. However, I felt the need for some formal recognition, so I asked that Sergeant Major Douchebag write a letter of apology addressed to both my wife and I, which is to be signed and dated. This was granted, and I received said letter 2 days later. It said, "Lance Corporal and Mrs. X, I am writing this letter to you both to apologize for the torment and anxiety that you both must have felt from the messages that you received from my Facebook account. To Mrs. X, nobody should ever be in a situation where they worry about going to work because of who may come through the door, especially so when they have the added stress of a partner being operationally deployed at the time. The anguish that you must have felt at this time is immeasurable, and for this, I apologize. To Lance Corporal X, being operationally deployed is stressful enough without the added stress and worry about family back home. Support from home and loved ones is what carries many people through tough times whilst on tour. For any undue angst caused, I apologize. I regret any hurt and anguish caused by this issue and apologize, wholeheartedly and unreservedly, to you both." I now waited. I saw out the rest of my time in Holland, moved back to the UK to my new base, and waited some more. Almost 3 years after I received the apology letter, I looked up Sergeant Major Douchebag's wife on Facebook. I had known the whole time we were out there that he was married. His wife lived back in the UK, and he has routinely tried to cheat on her. I sent her the same screenshot which I had sent to the colonel. I also, before leaving Holland, printed off the emails between the colonel and myself where I requested the apology letter. I blanked out the colonel's details and sent the pictures of that. And then, lastly, I sent a picture of the apology letter, signed and dated by her husband, admitting what he had done. Once I saw she had read it, I blocked her, blocked Sergeant Major Doshbag and all his friends who had also been out in Holland at the same time. Why 3 years? I remember him saying, before he turned into a douchebag and tried it on with my wife, that he only had 3 years left to serve. If my timing was correct, he was months away from completing his 22 years and receiving a very nice pension. If his wife decided to go ahead with divorce, she would take half of said pension, which would essentially screw him over for the rest of his life. For context, the Rural Fire Service here in Australia always drives around at Christmas time dressed as Santa to spread some Christmas cheer and hand out candy to the kids. These people are volunteers that have given countless hours of their time and put their lives on the line for the community and never ask for anything in return. These people also give up spending nights with their families for 3 entire weekends. Every December, these volunteers don't have to do what they do, but they do it out of the kindness of their hearts to bring joy to the kids for free. So, last night was our area's turn to have Santa come round. Personally, me and my family thought it was great, and seemingly so did most of the community. But today, there was a post on the local community Facebook group from a entitled Mother, we'll call her Karen, trash, talking the RFS, accusing them of treating her kids like dogs. They didn't. They tossed the candy out to the kids, similar to how performers on parade floats do, as they simply don't have time to stop, cause of the area they have to cover, and throwing a massive tantrum because they didn't give her crotch goblins a one-on-one with Santa. They haven't done one-on-ones during the drive-by since the pandemic started 2 years ago, even though there is literally a special event next Friday, as stated in our local representative's reply to her, where kids can see Santa one-on-one. Karen also made it her mission to reply to almost everyone calling her out for being entitled, trying to make the RFS seem like a piece of trash, but only ever really proving how over-entitled she is. Our local representative, who has officially earned my respect for this, replied to Karen calling her out on her entitlement and told her if she doesn't like that they won't feed her entitlement, she's more than welcome to don the suit in this near 30-degree weather and do meet and greets herself. A few years back, my mom and first stepdad got a divorce. First, I was elated. My stepdad was always hard on me and even made me depressed to a point where I wanted to die. Anyways, I soon realized that despite this, I cared for him like he was my dad. He had raised me most of my childhood, along with my half-brother, his son. Anyways, that last years of their marriage, my mom and stepdad constantly got into fights. My stepdad was a mean drunk and was in complete a-hole when in a stupor. They separate but still live together while the divorce is being drafted. My mom talked to a lot of men she met online. One of them was my second stepdad. For the sake of simplicity, we'll call him Dan. Now, when I first met Dan, me, my brother, my mom, and our collie, Pyrenees Cross, were out for a walk along the rural canal roads. If you know, you know. Anyways, this fake blue Ford Escape pulled up looking for my mom. We get into this rando's car and go for a quick drive. He buys me and my brother chocolate milk and seems like a nice dude. He drops us off, and my stepdad was rather mad. A week later, and it really hits a climax. My mom tells us boys to pack some clothes and blankets. Dan came and took us to his house where we meet his mom, the homemaker, I guess. We end up staying for a couple months. The divorce is finalized, and my stepdad gets us on weekends occasionally. Well, this is where things become weird. The house he rented was very small. Housing 5 people in a 1-bedroom house is a pain. We end up moving into his aunt's house, which is a crap hole. Dog feces everywhere. Me and my bro slept in a windowless room and barely came out. Eventually, this becomes too much once more, and my mom's mom rents us her camo trailer. We park at a park and so on. My mom gets this grueling job of newspaper delivery. For those who don't know, it's 7 days a week and at the wee hours of the morning. The whole summer was a insomniac nightmare. One night, I get mad. My phone was taken for 3 months at this point. I've been the main runner for the route and haven't been rewarded in the slightest. I ask my mom and Dan if can have my phone and he blows. He shoves me around this small camp trailer, kicking me and punching me. He even attempted to drag me outside into the sharp gravel. For a month, 6 incidents like this happen. I become depressed. I have no way to express my sadness other than to my stepdad. Least to say, he was livid. He held his tongue per my requests. I feared Dan would attack my brother and my mom. Another month goes by with 1 incident, and my mom and Dan have a huge fight about some unfaithful stuff she found on his phone. The next day, his sister comes and picks him up, and he flies to Oklahoma. 5 months go by. We went and moved in with my stepdad and his girlfriend at the time. Everyone got along pretty okay. My mom got with another guy who tried to fight me. He was pretty scrawny compared to a bumpkin who spent his childhood helping build sheds and move heavy stuff, me. He leaves as well. My mom somehow gets into contact with Dan again. At first, I was livid, but she eventually ensured it wasn't going to be the same. By this point, it's 2021. Early February, I think. It's been a full year since I first met him, and I'm not even done yet. Perhaps come back for part 2. I was browsing through the aisles of the local grocery store when I saw her, Karen. She was standing in front of me in the checkout line, huffing and puffing as if she was the only one in a rush. I could see her fiddling with her purse, probably looking for her wallet, while the cashier patiently waited for her to sort things out. "Excuse me," I said gently, tapping her on the shoulder. "I think you need to sort out your card before you get to the front of the line." Karen turned around, and her eyes bore into me like lasers. "What do you mean? I know what I'm doing, thank you very much." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that I've seen people get stuck in line before, and it can hold up the queue for everyone else." Karen scoffed and turned back around, her body language screaming her displeasure. I sighed and rolled my eyes, mentally preparing myself for a long wait. The line moved slowly, but Karen finally made it to the front. She handed her card over to the cashier, who swiped it and waited for it to process. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the cashier said finally, handing the card back to Karen. "It's been declined." "What do you mean, declined?" Karen demanded, her voice rising. "There's plenty of money in there." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but it's saying it's declined." Karen started to get angry. "This is ridiculous. Try it again." "I can try it again, ma'am," the cashier said patiently, "but I don't think it will work." Karen shoved the cashier out of the way and grabbed her card back. "I'll do it myself," storming towards the self-checkout machines. I shook my head in disbelief as I paid for my own items and left the store. People like Karen never cease to amaze me. As I walked towards my car, I saw Karen again. She was still at the self-checkout machines, her card still not working. She was yelling and swearing at the machine, attracting the attention of other customers. "Excuse me, is everything okay?" "Mind your own business," Karen snapped, turning to face me. "And stay out of my way." "I'm just trying to help," I said, holding my hands up in a placating gesture. "Maybe there's something wrong with the machine. Have you tried using a different card or paying with cash?" Karen glared at me, her eyes narrowing. "Who do you think you are, telling me what to do? I don't need your help. Now leave me alone." I took a step back, not wanting to provoke her any further, but Karen wasn't done yet. She shoved me hard, causing me to stumble backwards. "Get out of my way, you stupid little twerp." That was it. I'd had enough. I wasn't going to stand there and let her treat me like that. "Excuse me, miss," I said, speaking in a calm, even tone. "You can't just shove people like that. I'm going to have to ask you to calm down and leave the store." Karen was incensed. She started to yell and scream, attracting the attention of the other customers. She even tried to hit me, but I was able to dodge her blows. That was when the security guard arrived. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, looking between Karen and me. Karen immediately switched gears, adopting a pitiful tone. "Oh, thank goodness you're here," she said, clutching her purse. "This man has been harassing me and trying to steal my money." I rolled my eyes. "That's not true," I said firmly. "She's the one who shoved me. I was just trying to help her with her card." The security guard nodded, looking between us. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave, ma'am," he said, turning to Karen. "And, sir, I'll need to see your ID. I complied, pulling out my wallet and handing over my driver's license. Karen was still protesting, but the security guard wasn't having it. He escorted her out of the store, muttering something about entitled people under his breath. As for me, I was just glad that the whole thing was over. I got back into my car and drove home.